I think we're just going to hop in, and I know that we've got a couple of other folks that are expected to be here for panelists, and they can just hop in when they do. So, for those of you who are joining us live, thanks very much for being in the Horizon Room with us. This is I think our 7th episode of this, and it's live. And I'm sort of learning, and we're learning as we go. And this is a good topic. This is one that has come up a number of times in conversations with education or professionals across the country. It's just one of those things that either people truly understand and are moving explicitly forward with, or it's something that they're like, I don't really know that I can define that. I'm not sure that I know what you're talking about. So today is really about process and technology model architecture. And so where I want to go with that is to sort of set the stage and set the topic for today's conversation. And then I'm going to turn it over with some questions because that's sort of what we do here in the Horizon Room. As you know, if you're brand new here, if you haven't been in the Horizon Room before, this is really a space for us to come together as educators. We share challenges, we share solutions, we share innovations, bounce ideas off of like-minded individuals, and really it's about anything that's on the horizon for us in the field of education as we all sort of move and transform, because we have been in a transformative mode for quite some time, and we can learn from folks. I just had a conversation with a friend of mine and colleague in St. Vrain in Colorado. We spoke this morning, and we're going to do some cool stuff together that we're going to bring to you guys as well as opportunities for learning. But we realized that he and I had been having this conversation for many, many years, and they've been at it for 15 years. And so it's not new, but what I find awesome is that there's people like Carla Burkholder, who's joining us today as an expert panelist, who have been doing this a while, and they've got some solutions and some things that they can share. And it's going to help us all if we can listen and learn. So I'm going to set the stage with this, right? And this is sort of it's kind of I use this in tongue in cheek, but kind of not. So in some conversations, people say, well, it's not about the tech, and I say, well, true. I mean, it is about the teaching and learning, and it's about the experience of the learner, and it's about engaging minds, and it's about all those things that are great and shiny and awesome, except it kind of is about the tech, right? At some level, it's kind of about the tech, right? We've got some integration needs, right? The tech is amplifying the learning experience, and the tools are there now, right? So schools have gone down the path like gangbusters, doling out devices and building up these deep technology stacks of resources, and it's barreling forward, my friends. It's barreling forward, and so it kind of is becoming about the tech, right? I mean, some of the stuff that we're talking about in terms of personalizing learning, in terms of creating flexible learning experiences, and different uses of space and time, all those things are reliant upon a technology foundation, and your understanding of that as an educator, regardless of where you are in the organization, your understanding of that is going to be critical. And it actually is critical. It's critical now, but it's going to be more critical as we move forward. And how schools and systems are mindful and purposeful in all of that is really pretty important. And I see the whole range of experience and knowledge and things like that as I go through conversations with colleagues, and that's sort of what we're talking about. So I want to start with this graphic, if you can see this. So this is essentially how a school system is structured, right? And so today there's essentially 3 layers, and obviously this is relatively simple. And yes, there are complexities that go on within each one of these, but essentially there's 3 layers, right? There's a technology infrastructure layer, there's a logistics layer that's required, and then there's a design for learning layer. All 3 of those have to be operating efficiently and successfully in order for the whole package to actually work, right? And so for example, the foundation layer of technology is really that those technologies like the graphic points out, hardware, networking, security, software, all your SISs, all your financial software and all the hardware that goes along with it, all your networking stuff, all the access points, all the devices, all the stuff, right? Software, your tech stack goes into that box right there. And that's critical, right? It has to be accessed reliably. And you can't not do that. It can't be a mashup. You can't just dump a whole bunch of tech into the system, pull the trigger, and then cross your fingers that it's all going to work, because that's absurd, right? The second layer is a logistics layer. This is like how people and things move within the system. And so that would be like your master schedule. What are you doing? How are you designing your master schedule around learners versus around teachers and rooms? And how are you actually using that as a lever? Because it is very powerful as a logistical lever for increasing personalization and flexibility. All of those things fall into that logistics layer. And then at the very top, you have design for learning. And this is the shiny and fancy stuff, right? This is where the magic is, except that I would contend that those other two things sort of fall apart if that bottom layer is not really done well and designed nicely. So that's kind of what we're talking about, because I would say that the top two layers today are not going to happen if that bottom layer is not firm and solid. So I'm going to throw that out. That's a grenade I'm just tossing out there for folks, and I'm going to land it in Carla's lap first, because I just want to know, what do you think? Where are your thoughts on that? Because you figured some stuff out, right? How did you go down this path?
So as you were talking, I was just thinking about all the different iterations of this that I have seen throughout my career. And I think that one of the things that we haven't done very well goes right along with what you're saying is we dump things out there, right? We haven't taken the time to really assess our infrastructure to make sure it can handle the load. And now any longer, we cannot ignore security. We cannot ignore data privacy. We cannot let our vendors not sign data privacy agreements. We have to do all of that. So I think that's one thing that we have not done especially well in the past, but we're getting a lot better at it. And you're right, those other two layers, they won't function very well without that solid infrastructure and technology foundation. But one of the other things that I feel like we haven't in the past done very well is planning for that top layer. So we toss a lot of stuff out there, shiny new technology, software with flashy, pretty graphics and stuff that make us go, ooh, but we haven't really planned, what's the instructional value and where does this fit in our curriculum? And I think unless we do that and we do that well, we can't really give students the personalized pathways that they need and want. They can't really have the voice and choice that they need and want. So I think we have to get a whole lot better at doing that. Planning for technology, planning for those resources before we just toss them out there. It's like, here you go.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, totally. I get it. And so one of the things that you brought up was assessing the infrastructure. What sorts of things have you seen in your experience that even looks like? Because I'll qualify that, because I've had a recent conversation where I was talking about some system level, some sort of baseline assessment of not just need, but of assets within a system. Mm-hmm. And I got sort of a quizzical look, and I thought, well, maybe I'm speaking in a different language, or maybe it's not clear. So could you sort of shed some light on what your experience has been with making that assessment, that baseline assessment?
Mm-hmm. So I think it's really, really important that just as we audit our finances, we have auditors come in and do that we have our infrastructure, our technology audited as well. And so I have contracted with companies, consultants that do that, and they come in and look at everything. They looked at classroom technology, they look at the network, they look at how the network's structured, they look at access points, they do wireless evaluations to see where there's holes. the whole thing. And then that really gives you something to work from to, fill in those holes, make it more robust, and so that it can handle all the things that you want to put out there. But I think it's important to have a third party come in and do that, because when it's ours, we look, okay, well, I know I need that and we're going to do that. So that's okay. I'm going to say that's fine. So I think it's really important to have an objective third party come in and do that.
Because you hear that a lot, right? You hear, oh gosh, we can't afford it. We can't, the budget is tight, and couldn't we just do this ourselves? Why couldn't you? Because that's definitely something that I think if people who do have tight budgets, I mean, money is money, right? But if you do have a tighter budget and you know that you have to do this, what are the dangers of actually hopping into your own pool and trying to accomplish that?
Well, you can, but you can also reach out. There are organizations that will do this too, that will come in and do audits for you as well. I just think it's a really good idea to have someone who's not married to it, right? Who's not personally invested, that, I designed this is how it's supposed to work. It seems to be working fine. Because there's a lot of things that I may not know, that someone may not know, that an outside person would or might, they can call that to your attention. So I just think that's really important.
So it's like going to the doctor, right? I mean, you think you've hit WebMD enough times that you can diagnose your own illness, but then again, maybe not. Maybe it's
not a good idea.
It's probably not wise. I mean, I may have gone down that path once or twice, but yeah, it's probably not such a good idea. JW Marshall just joined us on the show today. And, JW, if you're still listening, what we're talking about today, hey, there you are. Always happy to see your face, sir. It's great to have you in the conversation. So what we're talking about is the necessity of this bottom layer. If you can see the screen, it's that technology infrastructure layer. And what we were just talking about was not only the importance of thinking through how we use technology in those top two layers, but that maybe those top two layers, I would contend, are really not going to work well if that bottom layer is not solid and hasn't been thought through the whole way. And so we were talking about one of the things that Carla brought up was an assessment of the infrastructure, an assessment of the system at that level, and the importance of that. And so that's definitely critical. But I've also heard from folks that are like, well, I don't even know what that means, so I'm going to kind of ignore it. What are your thoughts on that? What do you think? What do you see out there?
Well, yeah, and I think it's a similar conversation to the cybersecurity, is you don't think about it until it's too late, until you've had an incident. And then you go, oh my goodness, let me tell everyone I know, you need to be proactive, an ounce of prevention, right? I think it's the same thing here. And forgive me for coming into the conversation late, but are we talking about technology infrastructure for a district, or for like a company that's building software, or both?
No, this would be for school districts for sure. Yeah, okay. This is definitely school focused. Yeah.
Yeah, because on the vendor end, it also applies, and they do kind of go together, that companies need to build. They need to assess how they're going to build, because so many, especially if they've been around for a while, they've built on foundations that are no longer up to date. And it's really hard to go back and rebuild. But I've been with a number of companies in my career that have had to do that, some more proactively than others. And I think there's certainly some similarities between the pain of the process, but the benefit of the process of really going back. But I'm glad we're talking about the district side, because that, I think, as I've been talking a lot on my show about the infrastructure and how to really kind of rethink everything right now in education, that infrastructure is the foundation, right? For the best software in the world doesn't do any good if no one is trained on it and uses it, if the systems aren't there to make it easily accessible. And so you can work your way kind of backwards through, why is something not working the way I thought it should? Or, as you're saying, you can do more of a third-party audit, I would usually recommend, versus somebody internally. And it depends on the size of the district. Obviously, some large districts have large teams, and hopefully they're focused on this because there's large dollars at stake and large numbers of students at stake. But for the small and medium-sized districts, typically it's having a third party come in, and then the question becomes which third party and how do I vet, who is credible in this space. But all that to say, extremely important. I just did a panel a couple months ago called the Great EdTech Audit, where on average, I think if you see Learn Platform has put out some research saying districts use on average 1,500 different pieces of technology, top to bottom. Some of those are, behind the scenes technology. Some of those are, a lot of them are curriculum, but there's no time in the day to effectively, efficiently use all of those. And so this mindset of coming out of the pandemic, how do we not just tighten our belt financially, but time being our biggest resource. We can't use them all. We've been collecting programs for a decade or more, and the pandemic has kind of shown a light on, okay, we don't need 1,500. We need 100 that are really good, that are implemented well, that are secure, all the things. And so I think this conversation goes hand in hand with what I've been calling for, and hopefully many others, is this kind of audit of all things technology.
Sure.
The easiest ones to cut are the ones that are redundant softwares. And do we need 12 different reading programs? Maybe we don't need one because one size doesn't fit all, but maybe we need 5, maybe we need 3, maybe we need 7. We probably don't need 12. And elementary, middle, and high school may have different, but still, we collected these things because one teacher or one campus wanted something, and we bought it for everyone because there was a good sales rep on the ed tech side, and it didn't get used. And so a lot of our advice is, first of all, look at what's being used and not being used, and you'd be shocked what's not being used. And then second, look at what's working and not working, and you'd be shocked of things that districts are continuing to use just because they've already implemented them, and the pain of changing to something else is greater than the perceived value of getting the better program into the hands of the teachers and students. And now I feel like I'm rambling because
no, it's good.
No box on these topics.
Fantastic. That's what this is about.
And I think so often, though, we do get caught up on the top of the funnel and not the foundation, which is, making sure we have the right things in place. And that's the other thing I've been calling for on my show is with the ESSER money, not thinking about what did I used to want that I can get now, because that's probably ship has sailed, and don't think about what do I need for the next year or two. You got to think 5 to 10 years in advance. And when you think that far in advance, you think infrastructure, not just the latest program that came out, during the pandemic, but how do we use these one-time dollars to fix or rebuild or totally restart the infrastructure space. And it's not always the sexiest topic of, hardware, security, networks, but it's so critical. I didn't know this. Intel has an education group that offers free consulting on network and that kind of thing. And I've met some of the people from that team, and it's like this best kept secret in education that people don't know that it's out there. And they really are good people that aren't trying to sell Intel things. They do have a global education initiative that they really just want to help districts that want to be helped. And so I've uncovered just recently some interesting resources that districts could take advantage of if they just knew that they had a problem and they knew where to look for those solutions.
I totally think it, and that's part of it, is even knowing that you have a problem. I mean, part of that awareness is I think as I listen and I think about where we're headed and where we are today, people are starting to pare down. We're counseling folks to start to identify things that are working. Don't just look at things that are being used, but look at efficacy. Make sure that you're choosing top tier resources. Make sure you're partnering with the right people. And so what I think about is the sort of the progression of development, the developmental progression. Because I was talking with Carl. I had a conversation this morning with a friend in Colorado, and they've been at this for a long time. And they started down that path of inventory and identifying the things that are most highly effective a long time ago. And so they're 15 years into their evolution. And now some of the other school systems are starting to catch up, and they're starting to do the thing that they did like 10 years ago. And so what's fascinating to me from a broader perspective is to watch schools moving through what is now a relatively predictable evolutionary path. And you get to that point where you've collected all the stuff. You have no idea where this single app came from, but somebody loved it, and it's Senor Frog Spanish app or something like that. And you're like, oh my gosh, what are we doing? And it might be highly effective. If it is, how come everybody else who needs that resource isn't using it, and has it been vetted? And that's a whole different ball of wax. But what fascinates me is that it's almost a predictable progression, and I think that we can put this onto a sequence and watch people move along that sequence as they evolve. What do you think about all that, Carla? Where are you guys in your progression?
So, we are getting much better about understanding what's out there, what's being used. We do use our single sign-on to help us inventory those assets that way. But there are a lot of things that we can get on other ways without using single sign-on. So we now have an application that lets us see, okay, where are people going on the internet, and what is this app over here that they're using that we haven't vetted? Oh, I'm sorry, we're gonna have to turn that off. So there's tools now that help you do that. And so we're taking advantage of those, and looking through that and seeing where are these things. Okay, here's something that there's like 200 people that are using this. What is it? Okay, is it something we might ought to look at? Maybe everybody needs it, but some things definitely not. Some things we can go through and say, that looks like a social media platform, and probably our high school kids don't really need to be on there, and we can turn that off. So I'm really glad that there are those tools available to us now, because before we didn't know. And if it's something that especially something that we haven't vetted, and if it's free, I'm getting stricter on the freebies, because we don't know what they're collecting. So we're having to tighten down on those.
Yeah. So the other thing that I'm
wondering, soapbox for 1 second about free resources.
Yeah.
Nothing is free, because the time that is used for is an opportunity cost of something that could be better, whether it's a different free or a paid, or it's not a program at all. It's just a different way you use instructional time. So I think that's something that hopefully the bubble's going to pop on. A lot of free happened during the pandemic, and rightly so. It was helpful, throwing whatever resources we could at this terrible situation. But again, now we're coming down from that need, and we really have to look at the time spent and really help educators. And I've had talked with a few superintendents recently about this, that even when you're evaluating products, it's not just the best price or the extra discount, but really thinking about the opportunity cost of time, and paying a little premium if something is going to really be adopted, is going to be easy, is going to be effective, all those things. I think that's just another kind of public service announcement I'm trying to work on, that free is never free. Now, there always could be the catch, like, oh, it's free for X amount of time and then you have to pay, but just the time it takes to do the free thing is so valuable and precious. And we have to always be evaluating. It's just, I'll forward you guys a recent article that our amazing writer from my team, Robin Schulman, wrote about the 3 or 4 E's of like evaluating ed tech products, and its effectiveness, engagement, and oh my gosh, I should know them off the top of my head. Effective.
That's okay. We'll let you off the hook.
Something else. Yeah, it's really important. Easy. And I think there's a fourth, that it's efficient, that it works the way it's supposed to, it's supported, it's implemented, all that stuff.
I think we don't know. We just don't know what they're collecting. And if it's anything that requires the student's name or any other information about them, and we don't know that they're getting it, that's not okay. So that's really top of mind for us right now.
So I want to go back to a comment that you made, JW, because from the vendor side, from my perspective, advocating for a lot of the smaller systems in the country, right, and helping these folks to find partners, connect with other folks, and things like that, being the middle point for that. They don't have a C&I department, right? They don't have curricular resources in the form of humans who can actually go out and vet these things, and they can't say, all right, we need core and supplement for ELA at middle school. and have like at least one other person who's not you go down the path and scan the horizon, find the top tier resources, vet them according to the number of lenses that you have, if you have any in your district, and then hope that the company that you're engaging with is actually legit and isn't just trying to get you on the sales list. And so that's a little scary to me, right? I mean, and so part of this conversation is also helping those that are listening. How do you do that? If you don't have a curriculum team, what do you do? Where do you find the best top tier resources?
Yeah, and I'd love to get Carla's input on this, but from my perspective, being a career ed tech marketer and now VP of marketing, people are always surprised to hear that the best marketing is not marketing. The best marketing is customer referrals, and that means you're focusing more time on building a great product that the market will find organically than paid search advertising to not trick, but manipulate someone into finding your product, and then a slick, sales presentation, but then you don't deliver the goods. So fortunately, there is a lot of research that most educators, most schools and districts do find products by word of mouth referral. It worked for me. It could work for you. You should check it out. There's no way to kind of hack the system to get a less than great product out into the market en masse. Maybe some big publishers with big distribution channels acquire a company and try to kind of force feed it, to their big customer base. Watch out for those. But the small, medium-sized ed tech companies that are really passionate about what they do, I would recommend to all of them, spend more on your product, on your implementation and your customer support than you do on your marketing or even your sales, because you're building something to last. And so I think if you're out there listening, talk to, your friends, go on. I know LinkedIn is new for a lot of educators, but a lot of administrators are there, and, reach out to people, not just in your local area or in your state, but, people in other states that are, and just ask, put a polling question out there. Hey, we're trying to address this issue, crowdsource a little bit, and don't just go with what, the masses say, but that'll help you kind of get a short list versus just Googling, because there's ways that you can pay for those placements and ways you can manipulate your keywords on your website to come up kind of higher. And the first results, I love Google. We use it all the time for lots of things, but it's not always the best stuff coming up first. So crowdsource locally and online to kind of make your short list. I know it takes a little more time, but again, an ounce of prevention, the more upfront due diligence you can do, the less headaches you're going to have implementing something that is going to be out the next year or that isn't going to really work for you. I would say take your time and do that. But word of mouth, you can't beat it. And all the companies I've worked with, a big part of our strategy is how do we amplify the word of mouth? How do we tell the customer stories of success and let those speak for our company, and not a salesperson or a marketing campaign trying to, again, kind of cram down your throat why you're not doing it right if you don't do it our way or with our program. Avoid any company that tries to hard sell you like that.
Yeah, that's good. What do you think, Carla? What are your strategies? Where do you guys go?
So I agree with everything that JW just said. Also, there are services available that either have vetted some of those things or will for you. There's a Texas company that does that with instructional materials, and if it's something digital that's not just a part of an adoption, they will vet it for you. So that's really good. And of course, that's going to cost you. You can also, some of these things you can find at Common Sense Media. They will vet some, not everything, but there are some things there. And then if you are part of the Data Privacy Alliance, then some of those things have been, as far as student safety, data privacy, all of those things have been vetted, and they are listed on that database if you're a member of that. Now, as far as instructional value, probably not going to find that on that database, but you can also look and see, okay, who's really using this? Maybe this is pretty good, right? So that's kind of the back door into word of mouth. So really think we need to take advantage of those tools as well.
I think it's interesting that we haven't gone down that path. When I was in the teaching and learning seat, one of the things that I was always asking for was evidence of efficacy, and people could tell you when something was being used, but it became very difficult, and people got uncomfortable when I said, well, is it effective? Is this an effective tool? I see that it's being used, but is it effective? And today, I don't know anybody that's actually sort of even qualifying that information. And so in the back of my mind, I'm like, I wonder if there's a media and research organization that works with the education vertical that is impartial and could potentially spearhead something like that. Yeah, I mean, it's odd to me that it hasn't happened, and I don't know. I think you're right. I think all of those are great avenues, and for some reason, we all know the top players, right? We all know who the top most of the top end things are, but there's a lot of little things. A lot of the little guys are actually really good, and sometimes you're not going to hear about them, and you may not even know who to ask, and so it feels like we could short that path for some folks, maybe. I don't know.
I can jump in on that one too, and I promise I'm in no way paid by Learn Platform, but they are the closest thing that we have. They're a new organization that helps small, medium-sized ed tech companies conduct efficacy research at a price point that is viable. That was the big hurdle for a lot of growing companies, is the time and the money to do the big research study was so immense that they just couldn't afford it. And that really discounted them when the district said, oh, we needed this to be research-based. What research do you have? And all they have is really happy customers that are saying anecdotally that we couldn't live without this thing. It's helped our scores. And so check out Learn Platform. Again, I just happened to have them on my show recently and was really impressed with kind of what they do as far as helping these companies do efficacy research in a cost-effective way, but also helping provide this data back to the market so that they can see who's engaging in research. And then I would say the other way to get to know new companies that I would mention as kind of my second tier would be, thank goodness conferences are coming back in person, because that is a way that the small and medium-sized companies can afford $1,000 to come and attempt to talk to people at the show, kind of show off what they're doing. I think that's a great way for schools, for teachers, for districts to get to know new products, because it's a bit of an even playing field. Of course, you're going to have big companies with big booths and big banners and things, and smaller companies can't afford all of that. But it is a kind of a good environment to learn a lot of things in one place and kind of evaluate head to head different companies all at once. It's I know really tough with the teacher shortage still to get out in a way, but sometimes again the reoccurring theme I feel like today is the ounce of prevention. Like if you can find a way to get your teachers, your tech people, your curriculum people to that 1 or 2 shows a year for 2 days, they could be so much more efficient with their time to kind of evaluate a lot of things at once, see what's new, see what's got research behind it, and make some decisions, or at least shorten their list so that they're making good decisions for that next school year. I would recommend doing whatever you can to at least get some of your people out there into these shows as they're starting to come back. And I think a lot of the shows have taken this opportunity of a hiatus to really get better and be more, of exactly what educators and administrators need as they're wanting to come back together in person.
Right.
So
this
Chris,
brings
can I
up
just add one thing about that? I mean, that's awesome with new things, but I think we also need to do the same thing with what we already use. And I don't know that a lot of districts take the time to do that. I mean, you really need to evaluate, what are you spending $80,000 a year on, and is it really being effective? I know in my experience, I have had to take away a very popular product that everybody loved, because guess what? It was not benefiting one single kid. It was not instructionally, not educationally. It was fun for the prizes that you could get, but it really wasn't helping them. So I think we really need to get better at taking a good look at what we're using and evaluating that too.
So this is interesting, because what we came out of as we moved into a digital space, we came out of a paper-based textbook kind of a space. And when we were living in that space, it wasn't uncommon to have review that was scheduled, and it was periodic. And so you knew that every 3 years or whatever the cycle was, you would go through an adoption process, and you would have some vetting, and the teachers would get together and they would take a look at the stuff and they would try it. Maybe there was a pilot. There were a whole number of sort of structures and processes that existed in order to make sure that the resources that you were popping into the system in that form were deemed to be the best. And you would go look, you would search, right? And you would ask. The states would sometimes help. You would ask other systems, county offices were helping, that sort of stuff. Somehow when we jumped into digital world, all of that stuff went away. And it's almost like we didn't treat these resources with respect. It's almost like we said, you know what, it's just kind of a nice math thing. And yeah, I know you can use it for core, but you guys go ahead. You're fine. You're fine. Just toss it in there. And if it works, great. If not, I don't know. But we've had to shift our thinking around what an adoption means, because your digital resource might be changing on a pretty high frequency. They can dump new content in. They can update things. They can match standards more cleanly. They can shift and adopt that thing to different needs, adapt it, and yet we're stuck in this sort of old school way of thinking. And I don't know if we, I think that's another area of exploration and sort of some clearer thinking. How are you treating your digital resources, and are you putting them into the buckets that you need to be doing so that you don't have a sea of things, and maybe you don't even have core identified? That's a whole different conversation.
I mean, I could get on another soapbox on this one, but this is an exciting one. I think this is where I'm really optimistic, at least in Texas. We work in a number of states, but we do a lot in Texas. They're still doing adoptions, but instead of calling them textbook adoptions, they're instructional materials adoptions. And the textbook coordinator is now an instructional materials coordinator. And that is a big shift in thinking. And that was already starting to happen before the pandemic. Now, through the pandemic, it is going to be less of the Wild West and more of a focused approach. But that is still for core curriculum. But I think maybe to disagree a little bit, the supplemental, the onlines have been this, collection of things over time for a long time because there wasn't the process. And then you would have core and supplement. I think as we move to instructional materials and more online core, you're going to have a little bit less of a need for all the online supplements. So I think it's actually going to streamline a little bit to where you won't be bombarded every week with some new online tool, because the core is going to be online, and you're going to say, well, that's redundant. We already have a core reading program. We don't need 12 more supplemental online reading programs. Whereas before, the core was print-based and slow to evolve, and we needed the supplements because the students were digital natives. And so I think you're going to see this merging, and really interesting in the industry, how that works with traditionally supplemental programs like Summit K12 becoming more core, or more core textbook publishers becoming more digital. And I think the end result is going to be good. Would you rather drive to Blockbuster and get one movie or maybe two, run a late fee, have to go back and forth? Or would you rather just have Netflix where it's all right there? I think you're going to be living in more of this Netflix world online over the coming years in technology. And that's going to be good for everyone, for the student experience, for the teaching experience, for the auto grading and data. But we're not out of the woods yet. There's going to be a lot of work to get us from here to there. And at one point, I'm saying, okay, the pandemic is we're getting out of it. We're getting to this new normal, next normal. But in some ways, the hard work is kind of just beginning again. It's going to be different, but we can't just slide back into the old ways. We have to keep pushing forward, and we owe it to our students and our teachers to do that. So I'm bullish, I'm excited, and I'm optimistic that we're heading in this right direction, whether people know it or not. I think that's where we're going to be going in the next couple of years.
That's a great point, because I remember when some of the larger publishers started coming out with what at the time was a digitized version. And so, and it's fine. I'm glad that they were heading down that path. But what the teachers would constantly say is, well, can't they do this other range of things? Why do we have to have 15 other resources? And that's exactly what you're saying. And I will be optimistic with you, because I really, really want that. I really want that to happen, because why, sure, supplements, we are going to have a range of supplemental materials because we have a range of learners, right? And that's fine. But if we can have that range represented, it's not that hard, right? It's not like it's rocket science, because obviously lots of people create supplemental materials for core instruction. So how come the bigs can't do that? Maybe they can, and maybe they are. And I love that. For those of you who were listening and caught the Blockbuster, you may not know what Blockbuster was. It was actually a store where you used to go and browse for a video which showed up on either this round disc that you would put into a large player or a big plastic box. And it was really weird. It was like an alien experience. I can't even describe it to you folks who don't know what Blockbuster was like, but it was a weekend activity. It was like Friday evening for my family. Hey kids, let's go down to the Blockbuster and browse movies that we can't get because it's not available. Oh, you can see the jacket, but the movie's not behind it. Shoot. So sorry. I went down the rabbit hole on that one. Thanks. I blame you, JW, for that one.
But also it was for all of its trouble. If you didn't see it in the theater before Blockbuster, you didn't see it, and so it did bring more accessibility. It
True.
just now looking back on it, we go, oh, that was so inefficient and ineffective. So I don't think anyone should feel bad that we used to use paper textbooks. It brought that information to us in a certain deliverability, form. It's just we've moved beyond that, and we need to stop trying to hold on to it, because even 10 years ago, the last textbook adoption in Texas for certain subjects, we would ask them what their science curriculum was currently, and they said, oh, we adopted these books, and I won't name any publishers. And you could they were still in the shrink wrap 10 years later, or they were being used as a doorstop.
Nice.
The teachers had to move on because science especially evolves every year. It shouldn't be a once every 8-year adoption. And we'll get to that in the future, but they had to have supplements because the core wasn't providing what they needed, especially with No Child Left Behind and state standards coming in the last 15, 20 years. So again, I think that all happened. We can't go back and change it, but we can move forward now with a better way. And I think by and large, we have our heads pointed in the right directions. We just got to continue to do the work to get to where we need to go with it.
Totally. Death of Blockbuster. I'm going to welcome Derek Brown in the first breath. And in the second breath, I'm going to transition our conversation as we sort of near the end of our time back down to hardware and networking, and some of the security issues. We've talked a lot about software and things like that, but when it comes to actually establishing that network and creating an organization that has direction for designing that tech infrastructure layer, and then actually looking at the hardware and the networking and the security pieces, that's complex. I can talk all day about instructional materials, but the other stuff that I just talked about, that's outside of my knowledge range in a lot of respects. And so hey Derek, how are you? I'm gonna throw that grenade back over to you. Derek, if you could just do a quick introduction and then maybe tackle that. What would you say is some advice and some guidance for folks that are listening on how do you start addressing similar types of inventories and attention to that hardware networking security heavy layer?
Hello, Chris and other panelists. Good to see everyone. Good afternoon. I'm Derek Brown, currently the Senior Director of Technology Operations and Interoperability for Portland Public Schools. So in the Great Pacific Northwest, we're the largest school district in Oregon. I served with Chris for a little over 5 years. I was the Chief Innovation Officer for Evergreen Public Schools, and I've been in education for about 15 years. It's a second career for me. I came from industry, .com, telecom, but all on the technology side of the shop. So Chris, you posed a great question of where do you get started? And I'm a big fan of assessment and readiness. Before we know where we are going, that outcome or that end result, let's figure out where we are. We might have an idea. People have been in the district for a number of years, but I always want to start with a third-party objective assessment and readiness. Where are we? What does it look like? Because there's a lot of moving parts. We're looking at the ecosystem of what is either already in place or what we're going to build instructionally. And then we need to look at what does the schoolhouse, the classroom look like, and the depth of the access points, and then the security around all of it. And partnerships, and I've been a big fan of this for many, many years. We don't do this alone. We're going to partner. It's not going to be a one-time transaction. We're going to partner with organizations that do this better than we do. We have wonderful people in our districts that are extremely smart and do their jobs really well, but we want to partner with organizations that do this every day globally. And then that way we are protected, our student data is protected, and more importantly, the precious lives of our children. Because at the end of the day, when there is going to be a breach, we know it's going to happen. LA Unified, prime example. We want to make sure that we're with partners that have done this before. They know how to respond. We can have conversations with local law enforcement, with Department of Justice, FBI, and everyone else that's going to be involved to remediate this. And then the biggest thing, once you get the readiness assessment, is having conversations at the cabinet level. This isn't something that you just do in a vacuum within a technology department. It needs to be communications, human resources, facilities and operations, because what is plugged into the network is not just curriculum or digital curriculum or devices. It's thermostats, it's refrigerators, the Internet of Things. All of this is plugged into this wheel, if you will, and we need to protect all of it, because if there's a vulnerability and a risk, which would come out in an assessment, we want to be able to plug that. We're working on, in Portland Public Schools right now, a removal of admin rights from devices. Might not sound like a big deal, but it's huge. It is huge. I want to be able to download what I want when I want. I don't want to have to go to IT or to a service desk to request the download of software. But at the end of the day, that is what happened at LA Unified. There was a core system that hadn't been plugged or patched, and it was vulnerable and had admin rights and access. And so it's putting all of these structures in place, following guidelines. I hate to use the word best practices, but at the end of the day, they already exist, so we don't need to reinvent the wheel. They're global, and heading in that direction, getting everyone on board with what we're doing, why we're doing it, and creating that awareness starts it. But none of this is cheap. I'll give you another example. Baltimore County Public Schools had a vulnerability and a ransomware incident in 2021. As of this year, they're at $9.7 million. That's the cost of the ransomware exposure. They went, because it wasn't going to be affordable or sustainable to buy the curriculum, they created a lot of their own. And that's great. I think that's a wonderful idea, but in the process of creating their own, they also created their own systems, access that wasn't secure or as secure as it should have been. And they went from what they thought was not going to be expensive to now this. And then they had to turn around and purchase all of the systems and software that they were trying to avoid by creating their own. So large school system, Baltimore County Public Schools, you can Google it, $9.7 million to date and counting. The average ransomware cybersecurity incident is $4 million. And so for those that didn't think that was a big deal a few years ago, it is ginormous. And that readiness assessment before going out and, Chris, I heard you mention piloting and proof of concept. All those things are wonderful. But before you actually cut the PO and make the purchase, make sure the school system and security is secure as it possibly can be. Mm-hmm. I'll shut up because I can talk about this stuff all day.
That's great. I think that's awesome. And I just want to echo the necessity. And I think, Carla, we talked about this at some point, and Derek, I know you and I have, but that connectivity between the operating officers or the executive officers within the organization is critical, because there were any number of times when I had a really shiny thing in my mind that I wanted to do, and Derek said, well, yep, but we've got these 5 different things that we're going to have to get done before I even think about putting that in my system. I'm like, come on, we should just want to do it. And you're like, nope, not going to do it because this and this and this and this and this. Did you get this thing signed? Did you do this? Did you check these things? I'm like, oh, okay, you're right. And that's stuff that you just don't think about. I think, I think that the comment about making it yourself, maybe, but are you really mindful of all of those things? It's complex. There's a lot of moving parts.
It was a great idea 5 years ago. We thought you go out and talk to vendors, you find out how much things are going to cost, and you look at our educators and you look around the table and like, oh gosh, we can do this and we can do it better. We're going to save millions. Yes. I mean, theoretically.
Maybe.
Yeah, maybe. But then there's the risks that they have to look at the other side. There's 2 sides to a coin.
Yep, totally. Carla and JW, what do you think? What are your thoughts? Similar type of a topic.
So I will tell you that we are going through all this cybersecurity things now. I mean, we just this past summer took admin rights away. We had to put the genie back in the bottle, and everybody lived. It was fine. We're doing password resets. We have 16 character passwords. I mean, the whole thing. And we just very often say security and convenience do not go together. We have to keep reminding people those are not the same thing. So, we have to keep making changes, and we have to be diligent about it. And we've had some really tough conversations in closed session with our board to help them understand, why we need to do these things. And so we've been fortunate to have a superintendent who understands and a board who agrees. So, we're able to move forward with those things. But we do still get the calls. Can you just let me do this? Can you just let me have rights to my device? No, we can't. You're special, but we can't do that. So it's an ongoing challenge. And we have a third party monitoring our network so that if there's some trace of something out there, we don't have enough staff to watch those logs all the time. But they let us know if there's something we need to be concerned about. So you just have to, you gotta just cough up that money and make it happen.
Yeah. And there's so many things that go into that. I mean, just as I was listening to you both, I started to go through the number of things, like you were saying, a refrigerator plugs into the network, how many access points, what kind of technology already exists in the system that is now antiquated and no longer supports the thing that we want to do. How many desktops do you have in the buildings that are outdated and can't be updated? How about your iPads? Any of the other devices, Chromebooks that are no longer, that are at the end of their lives, and then are you purchasing them, right? Are you going to purchase your devices outright, or are you leasing them?
We purchase, and we have a life cycle, and at the end of life, we don't sell them to anybody. We dispose of them. We have a company that buys them back and does the military grade, getting all the data off of it, cleaning that hard drive. And so we stick to that, because again, we'll have folks who say, well, can I just keep these just for this one thing? And we have to say no, because there's a reason that we're getting rid of them. They're end of life. And you also have to think about what are those things that are out there, like HVAC, that has to have a port open that really never should be open at all. So if you don't know about that, if you haven't had an assessment where someone can tell you, hey, you've got this port open, you still are a sitting duck, right? So you got to know about those things.
Carla, that's great, and very rare that you're able to purchase outright in a cycle. Most districts that I've been part of have to operationalize it and then pay annually so that it never goes away from the budget. And then getting into the lease, still have a life cycle management, 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, whatever it might be, but that payment never goes away. That's awesome. You must have an amazing CFO and superintendent.
Let's just say it hasn't always been that way. There was a lot of things purchased and no plan to replace them. So it's taken a long time to get us back to that. But, leasing may be something we need to look at for the future, because right now we have money set aside from the fund balance to do all this purchasing. So, it's an ongoing opportunity to improve.
There you go. I like your choice of words. Opportunity for sure.
And I think we just have a couple minutes left. I just wanted to ask one more question because I'm curious to learn more. We've talked a lot about in this hour, just you need to know what you don't know, and you need to do an assessment. You need to be doing something, right? If you're not doing anything for cybersecurity, for infrastructure, something is better than nothing. But obviously, we want you to make the best choice. And you guys have touched on it recently, but I'd love to hear from both of you on what advice would you have? Okay, we've assessed, we've built a plan, we've started to implement it, but this isn't a one and done, as you both mentioned, right? This is kind of vigilance, and we're talking to small, medium, large districts. Maybe more for the small, medium, they don't have a big team. What would you recommend to stay on top of this daily, if not quarterly? Updates, threats, that kind of thing. What resources are out there, and how can they kind of, once they hopefully all take action on phase 1 of the foundation, what is phase 2 that they need to really be monitoring on an ongoing basis and having that budget, year to year?
Derek, you take that one and I'll follow you.
I saw you go off the mic and I'm like, oh, Carla's got this good.
No.
What has worked well in my experience is managed services. Our teams are never going to be big enough, nor are we experts. I mean, we just frankly can't afford the type of expert that we need, but we can build and grow our own. And so, give you an example, at Portland Public Schools, we're looking at a new EDR, XDR, endpoint security protection, along with managing everything. So we need to manage SIM. It's going to manage our entire platform and ecosystem 24/7, just like Carla said. That gives us 3 to 4 additional staff, 24 hours a day, security analysts that we couldn't have. And so that depth of knowledge, giving us the logs, and then our analysts that we do have, they know exactly what to look at once something is reported to us, and then they can go chase it down as wide and deep as they need to. So that's what I would recommend to organizations, especially school districts that do levies or bonds. It's compensable because it's now software, it's a dashboard, it's compensable and can be paid for through bonds or levies. Otherwise, it's going to be a challenge. You're going to have to stop doing something in order to create funding to do this, but not doing it isn't an option, especially if you're going down this digital path, which we all are. We just came out of COVID, so there's no going back. As Carla said, you can't put the genie back in the bottle.
You can't do that, and you're right. I mean, managed services for us is the best solution because we're not going to get a CISO. We're not going to be able to hire the people with the knowledge and skills to do all of that monitoring, that understand cybersecurity at the depth that needs to be. So we're relying on those folks who that's what they do. That's what they do all the time. And the one thing I would also say too is once you have that plan, do not put it on the shelf. It cannot just go on the shelf and just, okay, we'll get to it. You've got to be reviewing that plan and working through that plan all the time, and make yourself a roadmap and just say, okay, by December, we're getting this done. And by March, we're getting this done, and keep your cabinet updated so that the superintendent can keep the board updated and just know, hey, this is going to be a cost next year. So just make that plan and work that plan.
Nice. Hey, guys, I'm back. Sorry about that. We're experiencing a snowstorm here in northern Wisconsin, and I've already lost a couple of big limbs. And for some reason, the stability of my Starlink Wi-Fi is somehow questionable now. We had a bunch of snow, maybe 8 inches, and so apparently that's getting me. Thanks, folks, for keeping up the conversation. It sounds like it was good. We're running out of time, and I know that we've got a lot more that we could talk about on this topic. Definitely stay tuned. Some great ideas came out of this and some great solutions. I'm going to make sure that stuff gets shared. Some great ideas about vetting for efficacy. Things like the 4 E's of evaluation. JW, if you don't mind sharing that, that would be fantastic information for more folks to have. We started out the conversation talking about this technology infrastructure, and we really started to go down the path of inventory with software and instructional materials. That, oddly enough, is the next topic for our Horizon Room. And so we're going to be going down that rabbit hole even more than we did today. And so I encourage you, everybody who's here, our panelists are always engaged in this, but for sure, tune in. It's going to be in January. It's on the 11th It's definitely going to be a rousing conversation because there's a lot of stuff going on out there, and we want to make sure that folks have the right kind of guidance and have the questions to ask and some solutions. So thank you so much to our panelists for being here. I very, very much appreciate your expertise, and thank you for everybody who is listening. Any final comments, folks, before we sign off?
I'll just say I'm excited about the future of education technology and where we're going, and I'm really excited to learn more next week or next month.
Thank you. Thanks for being here. All right, folks. Well, then from the Horizon Room, we're signing off. We'll see you in January. Have a great day.